14. Michael Mcnu. Pennsylvania businessman Michael Mcnu was 60 years old when he fell for a much younger stripper and single mom named Jennifer Morrissey, who had turned to dancing to help make ends meet at a difficult time in her life. He was a regular at the club where Morrissey worked in Bucks County, and the two eventually took their growing relationship outside the workplace. Mcnu acted as Morrissey's sugar daddy for several years, paying her bills and financially supporting her through her drug addiction and repeated run-ins with the law. He also took Jennifer on vacations and bought her expensive gifts, including motorcycles and cars. The relationship between Mcnu and Morrissey was on and off again, and at times the relationship ran deeper than a typical sugar daddy arrangement. Mcnu even opened his home to Morrissey when she needed a place to live. However, he threatened to end things for good in August 2017, after the young woman shacked up with a member of a motorcycle gang. Around the same time, he stopped showing up at work and fell radio silent, causing his friends and family to become concerned for his well-being. They had cautioned Mcnu against dating Morrissey, who seemed like nothing but trouble. Of course, though, he hadn't listened. And now they were worried that their worst fears about the relationship were about to unfold. After several days without any word from Mcnu, his boss paid a visit to his home and found him dead in his living room with a gunshot wound to the head. Text messages from the day of the murder revealed that Mcnu had kicked Morrissey out of his house and put her belongings in a storage unit. He cautioned Morrissey against showing up at the residence with her boyfriend and warned that he was prepared to defend himself if necessary. Morrissey responded with a threat to cut Mcnu's throat and gut him like a deer. And she said to get ready because she was on her way over. She later claimed in court that she accidentally shot Mcnu during a struggle over his gun, and that he'd charged at her like a madman with the weapon in his hand. The court didn't buy Morrissey's self-defense claim, especially since a friend who helped dispose of evidence testified that nothing at the scene looked accidental. Detectives concluded that Mcnu had been ambushed while relaxing in a chair. He was shot in cold blood at point-blank range, with the barrel of the gun positioned less than an inch, 2.54 centimeters from his face. Morrissey tried to stage the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong, but the evidence spoke for itself. Jailhouse informants further helped to solidify the case against her. At the moment, she's currently serving a life sentence for first-degree murder. 13. Amanda Drago. In a bizarre tribute that appeared on Instagram in December 2018, former adult performer Amanda Drago marked the first anniversary of her sugar daddy's death by pointing out the long list of things she disliked about him. She also spoke about one or two things that she liked, or at least tolerated, about him, describing the relationship as toxic and saying that she wished they'd never met. The 28-year-old admitted that she was struggling to think of some good memories to mention. Drago posthumously thanked the man, named Brad, for buying her a racehorse, a Birkin bag, and her first pair of Louboutins. But she went on to say that she didn't forgive Brad for omitting her from his will or attacking her while high on whippets. She then concluded the post by confirming Brad's suspicions that she'd been living a double life with a man she claimed was her gay bodyguard. The brutally honest post naturally attracted a lot of attention, and people wanted to know more about the twisted relationship that Drago described. She spilled the details to BuzzFeed, explaining that she and Brad met in 2012 while she was working for an escort agency. Her employer mistakenly sent her to Brad's house in Beverly Hills after he'd requested a different escort, but he ended up taking a liking to Drago. The two carried on a sugar daddy, sugar baby relationship for more than 5 years. Drago said that she kept the arrangement a secret from most of the people in her life because she was embarrassed about being a sugar baby. But she wanted to be financially independent, and Brad had offered too much money for her to pass up. When asked about her allegation that Brad had attacked her while high on whippets, Drago explained that he'd fallen into a deep depression and was coping through heavy drug use. She refused to be intimate with him because he hadn't showered in days, and he allegedly chased after her as she kicked off her high heels and ran away barefoot. Drago vowed to never speak to Brad again, but their involvement with one another continued until his death in 2017 from a heart attack. After her death anniversary post went viral, Drago said that she didn't feel one bit of remorse about her harsh words. She also claimed not to care about what her haters were saying and thinking about her. 12. Thomas Burchard. California-based psychiatrist Thomas Burchard was 69 years old when he met 25-year-old former Maxim model Kelsey Turner in 2017. Over the next 2 years, he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the much younger single mother. He paid all of Turner's bills, including her $3,500 rent, and bought her expensive gifts, including a car. Burchard was a respected member of his profession, but his personal life was a little more complicated. He'd gone through a divorce in the early 2000s after his wife caught him financially supporting other women. And while he insisted these arrangements were totally platonic, his ex claimed otherwise. So it was no surprise that Burchard was in a long-term relationship with someone else when he met Turner. His partner, Judy Earp, knew about the arrangement and didn't like it. She believed that Turner was taking advantage of Burchard, who'd started exhibiting possible signs of dementia. Burchard was already generous to a fault, and Judy worried that he would be even more giving if his mental faculties were declining. In 2019, Burchard took a last-minute trip to visit Turner in Las Vegas. By then, he had tried ending the arrangement several times, yet still found himself supporting Turner. He continued even after she'd moved her new boyfriend into the home that Burchard was paying for. So he told Judy that he planned to witness Turner's dishonest behavior firsthand and finally end the relationship for good. During his time in Vegas, Burchard went radio silent. When he failed to return home to California as planned, Judy reported him missing. A few days later, Turner's car was found abandoned in the desert with Burchard's murdered body inside. He'd been bludgeoned to death. And the investigation quickly led police to identify Turner, her boyfriend, John Logan Kennison, and her roommate, Diana Pena, as the top suspects in the case. The trio had already fled Las Vegas, but Pena had second thoughts about running from the law and ended up turning herself in. She revealed that Kelsey had gotten angry at Burchard over some text messages she found on his phone, including conversations with her mother about trying to get her child taken away from her. The argument escalated to the point where Burchard retreated to a room and locked the door. However, Kennison broke down the door and battered Burchard with a baseball bat. Pena claimed that she urged her friends to take the injured senior citizen to a hospital, but the beating continued, and the three suspects were now facing serious charges. In exchange for her cooperation, Pena was spared from prison time and was instead sentenced to 3 years of probation. Kennison pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 18 to 45 years behind bars. Turner took an Alfred plea for the same charge, which means that she maintained her innocence while admitting that the prosecution most likely had a strong enough case to secure a conviction. As a result, she was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. 11. Shannon Haynes. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in October 2018, 26-year-old Shannon Haynes arranged to meet a 37-year-old man she'd connected with on a sugar daddy dating website. The two met at a private residence south of Sydney in the city of Wollongong after discussing the amount of Shannon's allowance. She'd asked for $1,000, or $655 per week, but ended up settling on $300, or $196. The prospective sugar daddy would later tell police that he set $300 on a bedstand and proceeded to get hot and heavy with Shannon, who repeatedly asked for $1,000 while they were being intimate. At some point, he decided it was best to end the meeting and cut his losses. He would later claim that when he left the house, Shannon and two men were waiting outside for him. Armed with a tomahawk, one of the men ordered him to pay the young woman $1,000. When the man said he didn't have any more money, The suspect allegedly struck him in the side of the head with the tomahawk. The victim called the police and drove himself to the hospital, where he received 16 stitches to his ear. Shannon insisted that she'd called her accused co-conspirators to the house to deliver drugs, and that she had no idea they were going to attack the sugar daddy. But the police didn't buy her story, and she was arrested on suspicion of methamphetamine possession and 1 count of demand property by force in company. She eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of demanding property with intent to steal and served 10 months of a 1-year prison sentence. Following her release, Shannon told 9 News that she essentially pleaded guilty to avoid a harsher punishment, but that she still maintained her innocence. She claimed that the sugar daddy had gotten violent with her and threatened to take back the money he'd set on the table because she wanted to take a cigarette break during their session. Unfortunately, there's no way of knowing exactly what happened during the encounter, leaving one to hope that both parties have put it behind them and moved on with their lives. 10. Peter Morgan. In 2016, 53-year-old British multimillionaire Peter Morgan found out that his sugar baby was planning to end their relationship. The property developer made the discovery after secretly bugging the bungalow of his Welsh castle, where 25-year-old Georgina Simmons had been living rent-free. And while living at the castle, she was also receiving £10,000 per month in cash allowances. Morgan listened in as Simmons discussed her plans to fleece him by persuading him to sign the bungalow over to her and then leaving him. At the time, Simmons had agreed to an exclusive arrangement with Morgan, but she wanted out from under his thumb and had secretly reconciled with the father of her child. She planned to obtain ownership of the bungalow, which Morgan had promised to her as part of his divorce settlement with his estranged wife, by threatening to blackmail him with explicit videos of a 3-way encounter he'd participated in. Once the property was in her name, she would drop Morgan like a hot potato and start having arrangements with other men. During the many phone conversations that Morgan listened in on, Simmons made it clear that she couldn't stand her older lover, but didn't mind taking his money. Morgan, on the other hand, had fallen in love with Simmons, and until he discovered how she really felt, he saw a serious future with her. He would later claim that he ended his marriage specifically to pursue a real relationship with his sugar baby. Enraged by the fact that he'd been taken for a fool, Morgan strangled Simmons to death. He then wrapped her lifeless body in plastic, loaded it into his car, and hid it in an outbuilding behind his estranged wife's house. Footage from Morgan's own security camera, which he'd forgot he installed on the property, later helped implicate him in the murder. During his trial, Morgan argued that he wasn't responsible for the crime due to his Asperger's syndrome. He testified in great detail about what happened on the morning of Simmons' death. He told the jury that he offered to sign the bungalow over to her if she agreed to hand over the incriminating threesome footage she'd threatened to share with his family. But Simmons refused, so Morgan strangled her with a homemade ligature he'd brought with him. He admitted that he eased up on the pressure twice, but resumed strangling the victim when she continued refusing to honor his demands. As she fought for air, Simmons choked out the words, "You'll pay for this." And she was right. Instead of kicking back in his lavish castle, Morgan was relegated to the confines of prison, where he's serving a 25-year minimum sentence for murder. 9. Mark Gray. Australian multimillionaire brothel owner Mark Gray, formerly known as Mark Gdansky, met an attractive blonde dancer named Ellie Price at a strip club in Melbourne in 2017. For nearly 3 years, he shelled out around $150,000 to pay for her luxury housing, while giving her a $2,000 weekly cash allowance. He also paid for Ellie's car, clothing, and other expenses, even after she began dating another man. In 2020, Ellie sent Mark a text message demanding $100,000 and threatening to falsely accuse him of assault if he failed to pay up. Mark forked over $25,000 and said he would try sending more money in a few months. He would later testify in court that the demand was out of character for Ellie, causing him to suspect that her boyfriend, 36-year-old career criminal Ricardo Barbero, was pressuring her to extort him. Just weeks later, Ellie was found stabbed to death in her apartment. Her Mercedes-Benz was conspicuously absent from the scene, and Barbero was also nowhere to be found. The car was soon found abandoned, and Barbero was captured following a 2-week manhunt. He was charged with Ellie's murder, but maintained his innocence. Prosecutors described the victim's relationship with Barbero as toxic and marred by jealousy. The defendant allegedly had a history of physically abusing Ellie and was accused of killing her after an early morning argument. Barbero also had a lengthy criminal record and had known ties to the Italian mafia, further casting him in a suspicious light. The defense pointed the finger at Mark Gray, claiming that Ellie's attempt to extort him was an ample motive to kill her. Gray took the stand during Barbero's trial, denying allegations that he was Ellie's sugar daddy and that he was infatuated with the victim. He claimed that he just wanted to help the 26-year-old get back on her feet, which is a little hard to believe. The evidence was strongly linked to Barbero, while Gray had no identifiable connections to the crime and was never accused in the case. Barbero was found guilty by a jury in September 2023, following his 3rd trial, and now faces up to life in prison. 8. Asmat Ramal Shah. In 2016, a 30-year-old Canadian lawyer named Asmat Ramal Shah connected with an 18-year-old university student known only as KJ on a sugar daddy dating website. He agreed to pay the young woman in exchange for virtual companionship in the form of conversations and photographs. And as part of the arrangement, KJ agreed not to seek out other sugar daddies. However, there was no discussion about the possibility of entering a serious relationship. It wasn't too long before Ramal Shah allegedly began telling KJ that he had feelings for her and wanted a future together. KJ would later testify that she entertained the conversation because she believed it was a fantasy that she was catering to as an understood part of the arrangement. In early 2017, KJ and Ramal Shah met in person for the first and only time over dinner in Ottawa. Ramal Shah's behavior became increasingly possessive after that, according to KJ, who later accused her sugar daddy of calling her names. KJ also claimed that Ramal Shah interrogated her about whom she spent time with and threatened to ruin her reputation. About a year later, KJ tried ending the arrangement by cutting all ties with Ramal Shah and blocking him on social media. But he still found ways to reach her and allegedly nagged her to meet up with him again. Desperate to be left alone, KJ lied on 2 separate occasions to avoid going on dates with Ramal Shah, claiming on one occasion that she'd broken her leg and faked a cancer diagnosis at a later point in time. Suspecting that he was being lied to, Ramal Shah contacted KJ's family, friends, and her new boyfriend from multiple fake social media accounts. In one email to the young woman's mother, he accused KJ of defrauding and exploiting him. He instructed KJ's mother to make a financial offer in exchange for keeping the case out of court. KJ's family eventually hired a lawyer who sent 7 cease and desist letters to Ramal Shah that went unheeded. In 2021, Ramal Shah filed a $229 million lawsuit, accusing KJ of stringing him along with her fake medical stories as a ploy to convince him to continue sending her money. He claimed that KJ deceived him into thinking they were in a serious relationship, and so he sought the return of $20,000 to $30,000 that he paid her as part of their arrangement, along with millions in damages. The lawsuit was dismissed in early 2023. In the ruling, the judge described the situation as a case of unrequited love, in which Ramal Shah became obsessed with his much younger love interest. Furthermore, the judge ruled that Ramal Shah should have reasonably expected to pay KJ in exchange for her time, considering the fact that they met on a sugar daddy dating website. A few months later, the Law Society of Ontario found Ramal Shah guilty of conduct unbecoming for his treatment of KJ and her family, and suspended his license to practice law for a month. 7. Julio Cesar Vitoria. 62-year-old ice cream shop owner Julio Cesar Vitoria was found brutally murdered by his son in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 2014. His body was covered in stab wounds, his hands were bound together, and there was rope around his neck. Following a 15-month investigation, police arrested Vitoria's sugar baby, 34-year-old Paula Romano, on suspicion of murder. Vitoria had met Romano more than 10 years earlier when she was working as a waitress at a bar that he owned. Like many other sugar arrangements, the lines became blurred when Julio developed genuine feelings, while Paula was in it purely for the money. She even had another boyfriend who she was more genuinely interested in. According to prosecutors, Paula tied Julio up under the guise of playing a bedroom game, taking full advantage of his trust to render him helpless. She then attacked him with a knife before running off with his cash and 2 cell phones. During her trial, Romano admitted to being at Julio's home on the day of his death. But she claimed to have no memory of what happened and insisted that she loved Julio. The court nevertheless found her guilty of murdering her older lover and sentenced her to life in prison. 6. Maxim Garv. With a medical degree and a following of 87,000 and counting, Russian influencer Ekaterina Katya Karaglanova had no shortage of admirers or opportunities. But the 24-year-old's promising future was abruptly cut short in 2019, when she was found murdered and stuffed into a suitcase inside her Moscow apartment. Her parents made the disturbing discovery when they went to their daughter's apartment to check on her after not hearing from her for several days. Suspicion quickly fell on Katya's self-proclaimed sugar daddy, 33-year-old Maxim Garv, who claimed that he provided the victim with an allowance in exchange for her companionship. He confessed to stabbing the young woman in a fit of rage after she mocked his bedroom performance. He claimed that Katya compared him to other men she knew, who were wealthier, more satisfying in bed, and had better personalities. Garv said that he snapped and attacked Katya with a knife. She tried to lock herself in the bathroom, but Garv yanked her out of the room and continued stabbing her until she fell to the floor and died. Throughout the case, information about Katya's secret life came to the surface. She was reportedly seeing several men for money, and had upcoming plans to visit the Netherlands with a wealthy older lover at the time of her death. Her parents vehemently denied the allegations surrounding their daughter's personal life, claiming that she wasn't short on money and accusing jealous classmates of trying to ruin her reputation. In early 2020, Garv was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 9 months in a penal colony. He apologized at his sentencing hearing and appeared accepting of his punishment, which his father described as strict. 5. Khabib Jackson. After his relationship with 29-year-old Louise Rump ended in 2019, British security guard Khabib Jackson couldn't accept that it was really over. The nature of their interactions after the breakup is unclear, but Jackson was known to refer to himself as Rump's sugar daddy. He even occasionally paid her to answer questions about her personal life. About a year after the former couple went their separate ways, Jackson expressed his desire to be intimate with Rump in a text message, which was followed up with the question, "Can't you give me what I crave?" Louise replied, no, but she agreed to pole dance for her former partner in lingerie of his choice at her apartment in Bedfordshire, England. Later that day, neighbors saw smoke spewing from the residence and called emergency services. While extinguishing the blaze, firefighters found Louise dead at the foot of her bed, along with evidence that an accelerant had been used to start the fire. Her body was covered in visible injuries, indicating that a struggle had taken place. The medical examiner later ruled that Louise had been strangled to death. Jackson denied being at Louise's apartment on the day of her murder, but phone records and other evidence pointed towards his guilt. After the murder, he'd been seen dumping Louise's bloody clothing along a roadside and getting rid of her cell phone at his workplace. He was found guilty, and as a result, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 23 years. While handing down the sentence, the judge described Jackson as having a primitive and narcissistic ego and an obsession with the number of female conquests he could achieve. 4. Peter McMahon. 68-year-old British retiree Peter McMahon was last seen taking a taxi to the home of 44-year-old Sharon Swinhoe in October 2012. 6 weeks later, the former civil servant's body was found in a freezer at the Newcastle home of Sharon's friend, Joseph Collins. The medical examiner who performed McMahon's autopsy ruled that he died from heart failure, which was triggered by someone gouging his eyes out. Financial records showed that in the time since McMahon had gone missing, Swinhoe had drained thousands of dollars from his bank account. During that same time period, Collins' neighbors had complained about an awful smell coming from his apartment, which he blamed on a clogged toilet. Collins, Swinhoe, and a third suspect named Ronald Douglas were arrested for their various roles in the crime. According to prosecutors, McMahon was infatuated with Swinhoe. He fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. But Swinhoe was only with him for financial gain and considered him nothing more than a sugar daddy. In court, prosecutors accused Swinhoe of being a habitual manipulator and caring more about her pet rats than she did about McMahon. Swinhoe and Collins maintained their innocence, but were found guilty of murder by a jury. The judge sentenced both defendants to life, with a minimum of 25 years for Swinhoe and 20 years for Collins. In February 2021, 8 years into her sentence, Swinhoe died behind bars from COVID-19 related complications. She had reportedly refused to wear a mask despite already suffering from asthma and COPD, and refused to go to the hospital when her condition worsened. After appearing to improve for a brief period, she began showing signs of a stroke and was rushed to the emergency room, where she died later that day. 3. William Davis III. When 18-year-old Dylan O'Donnell waved a knife around and told his roommates that he was planning to kill his sugar daddy over an $800 debt in 2012, they assumed he was joking or seeking attention. The self-proclaimed Satanist was an odd individual to begin with, so it was easy for those who knew him to brush off his peculiar behavior as meaningless banter. O'Donnell returned home to his apartment in Ormond Beach, Florida the next night in his sugar daddy's car and with blood on his arms. Once again, his roommates dismissed the situation, this time writing it off as devil worship stuff. They would soon learn that O'Donnell's sugar daddy, 38-year-old William Davis III, had been murdered in his front yard in the middle of the night. O'Donnell had reportedly just started working as an escort and had developed an ongoing arrangement with the victim, who worked in the deli at a Publix supermarket. The teen was allegedly angry because he wanted to charge $350 an hour and didn't receive the full amount for the time he spent with Davis. Police discovered the victim's body in a pool of blood behind some bushes after a witness who lived nearby called to report a suspicious incident. Davis had been bludgeoned with a concrete lawn ornament and was stabbed to death with a folding knife. It didn't take investigators long to discover that his last known interaction was with O'Donnell, whom he'd picked up in his car about an hour before law enforcement responded to the scene. In 2014, a Volusia County jury found O'Donnell guilty of first-degree murder and grand theft. And after barely becoming an adult, he was ordered to spend the rest of his life behind bars without parole. 2. Forrest Timothy Hayes. Almost everyone who knew 51-year-old Google executive Forrest Timothy Hayes had only good things to say about the seemingly straight-laced father of five. He began his career in his home state of Michigan and eventually relocated to Santa Cruz, California. Needless to say, it came as a shock when he was found dead from a heroin overdose on his yacht in the fall of 2013. The evidence led investigators to 26-year-old Alex Catherine Tickleman, who had connected with Hayes on a sugar daddy dating website shortly before his death. Hayes had paid the young woman $3,000 to meet him over lunch, and they made plans to party on his yacht at a later date. 8 months after the millionaire businessman's death, Tickleman was lured to her arrest by an undercover cop posing as a prospective sugar daddy. She was arrested and ultimately pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter, prostitution, drug possession, and destroying evidence. Tickleman was released from jail and was deported to Canada in 2017 after serving 2 years of a 6-year sentence. Prosecutors accused Tickleman of failing to call for help while Hayes convulsed and died. According to the state's version of events, she then took a swig from her glass of wine, stepped over her sugar daddy's body, and calmly left the scene. During a 2018 interview with news station KSBW, she insisted that she was the exact opposite of calm, and that she left the scene in a panic. Tickleman claimed that she didn't seek help because she didn't want Hayes to get into trouble with his wife, and because she also injected herself with heroin and wasn't thinking straight. She used her time in jail to get sober and continued to rebuild her life after being sent back to Canada, where she found meaningful work and looked forward to her future. Just weeks after the interview, Tickleman was indicted on a murder charge in connection with the death of her former boyfriend, 53-year-old Dean Riopel, who fatally overdosed in his home outside Atlanta 2 months before Hayes' death. The indictment accused Tickleman of injecting Riopel with heroin when he was passed out drunk, and authorities announced their plans to begin the process of extraditing Tickleman to Georgia. Unfortunately, though, there have been no updates since July of 2018, leaving the current status of the case unclear.
And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content.
1. Vaslav Popoff. In April 2022, a 42-year-old sugar daddy named Vaslav Popoff bragged on Russian national TV about his playboy lifestyle, which included the several sugar babies who were on his payroll. One of those young women was 18-year-old Sofia Krasilnikova, who was featured alongside Popov on the reality series I Want and I Will. Popov, an aspiring influencer who goes by the nickname Malmegan, shamelessly admitted that for the past decade, he'd only dated young women who were looking for a wealthy benefactor. He met Sofia in 2021 through a sugar daddy dating website and said the beginning of their relationship was like a fairy tale. Just 3 months after the show aired, Sofia was found murdered in her Moscow apartment. She'd been stabbed in the chest at least 15 times and was mutilated beyond recognition. 2 days before Sofia's death, Popov had been seen entering Sofia's apartment with her, making him the last person to see her alive. He left the building 12 minutes later, but Sofia was never seen alive again. By then, the relationship between the two had taken a turn for the worse. Sofia had accused Popov of assaulting her, but had withdrawn the complaint to the police. Popov denied the allegations, claiming that the police report was made as part of a bizarre campaign to increase his online fame. He also denied Sofia's mother's accusations that he was stalking the teenager, similarly chalking this up as part of his clout-chasing strategy. According to Russian news sources, Popov had a history of crimes against women, including extorting prostitutes and blackmailing the women he slept with. He was detained in connection with Sofia's death in December 2022, after several months on the run. But there have been no updates on the case since then.
7. Jasmine Haran. Jasmine Haran is a well-known socialite and former real estate agent. The 32-year-old is believed to have shot Belizean Police Superintendent Henry Jamat. The mother of two had really been avoiding reporters for weeks when she decided to meet with 48 Hours, an American TV show, to exclusively discuss the night she shot and murdered a top government official in Belize. Towards the end of May this year, 2021, Haran had captivated the attention of the whole country. So what happened on the day of the murder? After midnight, emergency responders discovered Jasmine covered in blood. She was on a lonely pier near the Great Beach Shore property where she lived with her husband, Andrew Ashcroft, the son of a British billionaire. Authorities also found Police Superintendent Henry Jamat, one of Belize's most influential and well-liked officers, in nearby waters of the Caribbean. He was dead. He had a gunshot wound behind his right ear, and the bullet was allegedly fired by himself. There were several speculations regarding Haran and Jamat in the aftermath of the incident. Why were they on a pier by themselves, in the dark, at that hour of the night? Was it because of drugs, or was it infidelity? Haran denied that the two were having any sexual relationship. However, allegations soon arose that she had changed her version of the story again and again, which fueled further curiosity. This case is a fantastic illustration of how a billionaire may abuse their power in the most heinous way possible. Haran initially informed officials that Jamat had been shot by a stranger, possibly from a boat that was passing by. But later, she reportedly confessed to her attorney to firing the fatal shot herself. She said she fired at the officer accidentally. She went on to add that her buddy and well-wisher Henry Jamat had been pressing her to buy a rifle for personal protection. He had saved her from a near sexual assault just a week before. She said that they had been drinking before heading to the dock, where she gave him a shoulder massage. According to Haran, Jamat was teaching her how to load and unload the magazine and bullets from his Glock 17 service handgun. She explained how it happened by accident, stating, "I'm holding it like this to the top and like this, and I'm trying to get the magazine out. Next thing I know, the gun went off." Haran was charged with manslaughter by negligence. The family of Henry Jamat feels his death was the result of something much more heinous. A video of Haran knocking off the head of a watermelon with a shotgun like a pro soon surfaced. So obviously she is not as naive as she claims to be. Investigators in Belize have not revealed any forensic details nor any other official documents in the case against Jasmine Haran publicly. No trial date has been scheduled so far. As per the Belizean law, she could either be sentenced to 5 years in jail or might even walk free by buying her freedom. 6. Vijay Mallya. Former billionaire Vijay Mallya was a notable airline and liquor tycoon. But if you think he was well known for his business strategies, you're mistaken. This man is the very definition of what it is to be flamboyant. From excessive partying and a supremely elevated lifestyle, he had it all. Forget about owning a private jet. Mallya had a fleet of them. He was the founder and owner of Kingfisher Airlines. After a brief successful run, the business crash-landed and is currently inoperative. What followed was a chain of events that started with a tycoon claiming bankruptcy. Starting in 2012, it was found that Mallya was millions of dollars in debt, owing money to several banks, in an exhaustive attempt to keep his aviation company running. When the man went missing, all the banks, with the help of the government, put their heads together in a hunt like never before. But Mallya was prepared. He already had a foreign passport, which he gained after becoming a member of the upper house of parliament in India. Before anyone could get to him, he fled the country to the UK, leaving millions worth of debt unpaid for, and thousands of employees with an uncertain future. Mallya is yet to come back to India, despite the enormous effort by the government and the banks to arrest him. As per business standard, the entrepreneur is being accused of bank fraud and money laundering allegations, and legal action is yet to be initiated. Consequently, Malia will now have to give over all his payment cards as well as his remaining assets to a bankruptcy trustee. The trustee will identify his assets and liabilities. This appraisal will be utilized to pay back the bad loans incurred by the collaboration of Indian banks. Vijay Mallya's net worth was drastically lowered when a bankruptcy filing was utilized to retrieve over $1 billion in cash. That being said, he is still on the loose. A few journalists have even bumped into him on the streets of London, but apart from an attempt to get a quick word with him, nothing much has been possible. Will Mallya be extradited anytime? Will he clear off the debt? Only time can tell. For now, he seems to still live his billionaire lifestyle, although he officially claimed to have no money. We know he has billions intact. Somewhere. 5. Sylvio Berlusconi. Sylvio Berlusconi, Italy's former prime minister, has begun a year-long community service at a care center near Milan after being convicted for tax fraud. But this is not the first legal dispute he's got himself into. To avoid paying taxes in Italy, he and other executives purchased TV rights at exorbitant cost through 2 offshore firms in the early 1990s. In 2013, Berlusconi was sentenced to 4 years in prison, which was automatically reduced under a 2006 Pardon Act. Berlusconi was accused of paying for sex with an underage prostitute and misusing his power in June 2013. After serving 7 years in prison, he was prohibited from holding public office ever again. Nevertheless, he was allowed to remain free until the appeal process was completed. Berlusconi was convicted of paying for sex with Miss Marung several times in 2010 when she was 17. And what is particularly shocking is he was still Italy's prime minister at the time. He was also found to have misused the powers of his position by arranging to have her freed from police custody after she was apprehended in a small theft case. Marung was amongst more than 40 people questioned on suspicions of witness tampering in the case. In March, the new conviction showed that Berlusconi violated confidentiality and was again sentenced to 1 year in prison. He is revealed to have arranged for a police wiretap about a political competitor to be leaked and printed in a newspaper. The discussion took place between the CEO of Insurance Unipol and Piero Fassino, the leader of the major center-left party, and Berlusconi's #1 rival. Unipol was planning to take over BNL Bank in 2005. Magistrates had authorized the wiretap since they feared unlawful intervention in the takeover. Apart from these charges, another fresh trial cropped up in February 2014 in Naples. He was charged for attempting to buy a senator from another political party for a bribe of $4 million in 2006. A couple of other cases concerning bribing and tax evasions were also filed against him. But as of now, he's pretty much living it up still, most likely doing the same stuff as before. Do you think Sylvio Berlusconi will continue to get away with his crimes? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 4. Mikhail Khodorkovsky and Platon Lebedev. In 2004, Mikhail Khodorkovsky was the wealthiest man in Russia, and with $15 billion, the 16th richest person in the world. However, his luck ran out, as Khodorkovsky became his country's most renowned prisoner. How could someone go from being a billionaire to a prisoner? In 2003, he and his business partner, Platon Lebedev, were jailed for tax evasion. He lost his oil and gas business, Yukos, and was given a 13-year jail sentence after a contentious trial. Khodorkovsky alleges the sentence was influenced by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Khodorkovsky spent part of his term in a work camp in southeast Russia, where he wrote a 3-part essay on political and social duty entitled Left Turn. The partners were set to be freed in 2011, but were reconvicted on fraud and money laundering charges, which further piled on an additional 6 extra years to their sentence. On December 19, 2013, Khodorkovsky was finally released from jail due to his mother's ill health. Know how? Thanks to a generous pardon from Putin. Lebedev was released a month later. So the one who supposedly put him in jail was also responsible for releasing him. Think it was out of pity? Well, apparently there was something bigger going on. Khodorkovsky's release was presented as part of a Kremlin strategy to calm Western criticism of Russia's human rights record. The whole drama about releasing the billionaire unfolded right before the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi. By releasing Khodorkovsky 8 months before completing his sentence, Putin was not able to release his old opponent on his own terms, but also arrange for him to be transferred out of the country. 3. Raj Rajaram. Rajaratnam made his fortune as the founder of the Galleon Group, a hedge fund business in New York. In 2009, the FBI arrested him for insider trading, and a jury convicted him guilty of not one, but 14 fraud and conspiracy charges. The prosecution against Rajaratnam encompassed 25 additional defendants, of which 21 pleaded guilty. It was primarily based on wiretaps, a strategy previously utilized against suspected drug traffickers and organized crime leaders, but was unique in investigations of securities fraud. During the trial, prosecutors revealed multiple recordings of phone calls. Rajaratnam received or addressed inside information or gave guidance on concealing or covering up stock movements based on inside tips. The government said that Rajaratnam had benefited or avoided losing more than $63 million with his use of inside knowledge. In 2011, apart from being sent to 11 years in jail, he was also forced to give up more than $50 million and pay a fine of $10 million. He was reportedly freed early in July 2019, allegedly owing to the First Step Act, which Kim Kardashian, among others, pressed President Trump to pass. The statute grants early release to nonviolent criminals who are over 60 years old or are terminally sick. Now, Rajaratnam is claimed to be diabetic and living a quiet life in New York City under supervised parole. 2. Jae Yong. Jae Yong, known professionally in the West as J.Y. Lee, is a South Korean business billionaire and the chairman of Samsung. A South Korean court gave J.Y. Lee a fine of $60,000 for his illicit drug usage, handing a legal setback to the boss of the country's largest firm. After local media reports, a Seoul Central District Court spokesperson confirmed the penalty and 17 million won of extra forfeiture. During a recent court hearing, Lee had testified that he took the drug propofol 41 times during the 5-year time frame through 2020. Lee's defenders have claimed that he took the drug based on doctors' prescriptions, but accepted the prosecutor's charges. The Samsung tycoon was under psychological strain after the death of his father and was facing many claims of financial malfeasance. The 53-year-old has been caught up in legal issues for years, beginning with his workforce planning in 2014 when his father and Samsung chairman Lee Kun-hee had a heart attack. Lee was accused of using bribes to obtain support for his official succession at the corporation and jailed for 2.5 years before being released on parole. He now faces the threat of returning to jail if he is convicted of anything else. Allegations of his participation in financial crimes relating to a merger of the two Samsung affiliates in 2015 have him appearing in court hearings every week. Separately, authorities are probing further claims of tax cheating and concealing assets abroad after Yonhap News revealed a paper firm established in an offshore tax haven in 2008. Since he was released on parole in August, Lee has resumed managing Samsung and directing investment initiatives, including a $205 billion expenditure plan to develop the semiconductor business in Korea. He may also visit the United States shortly to confirm the chip maker's promise to establish an advanced chip facility on American soil. 1. Alfred Talman. Adolf Alfred Talman was an American businessman and philanthropist. In 2001, the former chairman of Sotheby's Auction Company was accused of scheming to set auction commission rates paid to U.S. sellers and was in breach of antitrust laws. The plot charged at least $400 million in charges from 1993 to 1999. Talman rejected the allegations but was still sentenced to a year and a day in jail. According to reports, Tennant was never tried since he could not be deported from London under English law. Talman, a millionaire who built shopping malls in America's suburbs, was sentenced to 9 months in prison. In May of 2003, he was freed. In his biography, Threshold Resistance, the extraordinary career of a luxury retailing pioneer, he writes, "I had lost a chunk of my life, my good name, and around 27 pounds.
Would you rather find out that your father is a sugar daddy to several young women? Or discover that your serious girlfriend has been accepting money in exchange for her companionship behind your back? Let us know which would be worse in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.